The White House was burning. Flames swallowed the heart of the American government, while terrified civilians ran through the streets carrying whatever they could save. Soldiers screamed in panic. Smoke covered the night sky. Government officials fled the capital in fear that enemy troops would arrive at any moment. And somewhere in the darkness, British soldiers stood victorious inside Washington, D.C. For modern audiences, the scene feels impossible. Today, the United States and Canada share one of the closest relationships in the world. Their border is peaceful. Their economies are deeply connected. Millions travel between them every year without fear. But more than 200 years ago, North America nearly became a continent consumed by endless war. There was a time when American politicians believed invading Canada would be easy. There was a time when British commanders believed America could be crushed permanently. There was a time when native nations fought desperately to stop both empires from destroying their future. And there was a moment when the United States itself came terrifyingly close to national collapse. This was not just another forgotten war. This was the conflict that could have erased the future of America before it ever became a superpower. This was the war that helped create Canada. This was the war that destroyed native resistance in the East. And somehow, most people barely remember it happened. This was the War of 1812, a war filled with burning cities, political betrayal, secret alliances, military disasters, propaganda, collapsing economies, and horrifying miscalculations. A war where arrogance met reality. A war where every side lost something. And a war whose consequences still shape North America today. In the early 1800s, the United States was still fragile. The country was young, divided, and deeply insecure. Yes, America had defeated Britain during the Revolutionary War decades earlier. But independence did not automatically create stability. Many European powers still viewed the United States as a risky experiment that could collapse at any moment. Internally, Americans constantly argued with each other. Federalists and Democratic Republicans attacked one another politically. Northern states and southern states already distrusted each other. Economic systems differed. Regional identities were stronger than national unity. And militarily, America was weak. Its army was small. Its navy was tiny compared to Britain's massive Royal Navy. Its economy depended heavily on trade. And unfortunately for America, the entire world was entering chaos. Across Europe, Napoleon Bonaparte was reshaping the continent through war. Britain and France were locked in a brutal global struggle for survival. The oceans became dangerous battlegrounds. Britain needed sailors desperately. So British warships began stopping American ships and searching for alleged British deserters. But the searches quickly became abusive. American sailors were kidnapped and forced into British naval service through a process called impressment. Imagine watching armed foreign soldiers climb aboard your ship and drag away crew members while you could do nothing to stop them. That humiliation enraged Americans. Newspapers exploded with anti-British anger. Young politicians demanded war. And at the center of that growing fury stood a new generation of aggressive American leaders known as the War Hawks. They believed America needed to prove itself. They believed Britain still treated the United States like a colony. And some believed conquering Canada would solve everything. That idea would become one of the greatest military miscalculations in American history. Many Americans in 1812 genuinely believed Canadians would welcome invasion. It sounds unbelievable today, but at the time, American politicians convinced themselves that people living in British-controlled Canada secretly wanted liberation. Some leaders openly claimed conquering Canada would require little more than marching north. No massive war, no years of bloodshed, just a quick operation. Easy victory, easy territory, easy glory. But they misunderstood almost everything. Canada in 1812 was not yet an independent nation. It consisted of British colonies with diverse populations, British loyalists, French Canadians, indigenous allies, merchants, settlers, and soldiers. Many residents distrusted the United States deeply. Some families had fled America during the Revolution because they remained loyal to Britain. Others feared American expansionism, and many indigenous nations saw the Americans as a far greater threat than the British. That last point was critical, because American expansion westward terrified native nations across North America. Again and again, treaties were broken, land disappeared, settlements expanded, forests vanished, entire ways of life faced destruction. For indigenous leaders like Tecumseh, the United States represented an existential threat. Tecumseh was not merely a warrior. He was a visionary. He believed native nations had to unite into one powerful confederation capable of resisting American expansion permanently. Without unity, he believed indigenous peoples would eventually lose everything, and history would later prove him tragically correct. Tecumseh allied himself with Britain. That alliance terrified American officials. Now the United States faced not only Britain, but also a growing indigenous resistance movement determined to stop American expansion forever. Yet despite all these warning signs, America marched toward war confidently. Too confidently. On June 18, 1812, the United States officially declared war on Britain. Celebrations erupted in some cities. Patriotic speeches filled newspapers. Many Americans believed victory would come quickly. But from the beginning, the war exposed how unprepared America truly was. The military suffered from poor organization. Supply systems were weak. Communication was slow. Many officers lacked experience. State militias often refused orders. Some soldiers literally refused to cross into Canada because they claimed their legal duty only applied to defending American soil. The United States entered war divided politically, militarily, and economically. Britain, meanwhile, remained focused mostly on defeating Napoleon in Europe. That fact may have saved America early in the war, because Britain initially committed relatively limited resources to North America. Even so, disaster arrived almost immediately. General William Hull led American forces toward Detroit expecting success. Instead, he encountered British troops working alongside Tecumseh's indigenous alliance. Tecumseh used psychological warfare brilliantly. His forces created the illusion of overwhelming numbers. Native warriors repeatedly marched through visible areas to appear larger than they really were. Hull panicked. Fear spread among American troops. Then came one of the most humiliating moments in U.S. military history. Without fighting a major battle, Hull surrendered Detroit. An entire city, thousands of soldiers, weapons, supplies, territory, gone almost instantly. America was shocked. Newspapers exploded with outrage. How could the invasion fail so quickly? How could a nation expecting easy victory suffer humiliation almost immediately? But things were about to get even worse. The U.S.-Canadian frontier became a nightmare. Small towns transformed into battle zones. Farms burned. Families fled. Raids happened constantly. The war along the border felt deeply personal because civilians lived so close to the violence. Unlike Europe's massive battlefields, this conflict often happened near homes and villages. and the brutality escalated rapidly. One of the most infamous events occurred after the Battle of Frenchtown near the River Raisin in 1813. American forces surrendered after intense fighting, but during the chaotic aftermath, many wounded American soldiers were killed. The event became known in America as the River Raisin Massacre. "Remember the Raisin" became a rallying cry across the United States. Hatred intensified. Revenge became emotional fuel for the war. Meanwhile, American invasions into Canada continued failing. At Queenston Heights, U.S. troops initially gained ground. Then everything collapsed. American militia forces refused to cross the river to reinforce their comrades. British and Canadian defenders counterattacked fiercely. During the battle, British commander Isaac Brock was killed. His death transformed him into a legend. For Canadians, Brock became the symbol of resistance against American invasion. Ironically, the war helped create an early Canadian identity. Before 1812, many colonies in Canada lacked strong, shared nationalism. But fighting against American invasion changed that. America unintentionally helped unite the people it hoped to conquer. As the war intensified, Tecumseh continued fighting for something larger than Britain or America. He fought for survival. Again and again, he warned indigenous nations that the United States would continue expanding endlessly unless Native peoples united together. For a time, his confederation became one of the most powerful indigenous resistance movements in North American history. American officials feared him deeply, not because he was savage, as racist propaganda often claimed, but because he was intelligent, charismatic, and strategically brilliant. He understood geopolitics, he understood alliances, and he understood the long-term danger Native nations faced. In 1813, American forces under future President Andrew Jackson and others intensified campaigns across the frontier. Then came the Battle of the Thames. Tecumseh was killed. The exact details remain uncertain even today, but his death shattered the indigenous confederation. And with it died one of the last major hopes for organized Native resistance in the eastern United States. Britain eventually made peace with America. Native allies were largely abandoned. And after the war, American expansion accelerated dramatically. For indigenous nations, the War of 1812 was not a patriotic victory story. It was a catastrophe. By 1814, the United States faced enormous pressure. The economy weakened badly. Trade collapsed. Government revenue dropped. Banks became unstable. Inflation spread. The government struggled to pay soldiers. Desertions increased. Morale declined. Meanwhile, political divisions inside America became dangerous. Many New England Federalists hated the war. Their economy depended heavily on trade with Britain, and the conflict devastated local businesses. Some politicians believed the war itself was reckless and unnecessary. Others feared the federal government was becoming too powerful. Then came whispers of something unthinkable: secession. The Hartford Convention gathered New England delegates to discuss grievances and constitutional changes. Some Americans feared states might leave the Union entirely. Imagine the situation from the perspective of ordinary citizens. The economy was collapsing. The military kept failing. The government appeared weak. Political unity was disappearing. And now British forces were preparing major attacks. The United States looked dangerously fragile. Far more fragile than modern Americans usually imagine. Then came the moment that shocked the nation. In August 1814, British forces advanced toward Washington, D.C. American defenses crumbled during the Battle of Bladensburg. Some troops fled chaotically. The road to the capital opened. President James Madison escaped. Government officials fled. Civilians panicked. Then British troops entered Washington. Soon flames consumed the city. The Capitol burned. The White House burned. Government buildings collapsed into smoke and fire. For Americans, the psychological damage was enormous. Foreign troops had captured and burned the capital of the United States. People feared the country itself might collapse next. Some believed Britain intended to crush America permanently. And honestly, that fear was not irrational, because Britain had now turned greater attention toward North America after Napoleon's downfall in Europe. More resources became available. More troops arrived. America suddenly faced the terrifying possibility of fighting the British Empire at nearly full strength. The future of the United States looked uncertain, very uncertain. Then something strange happened. As British troops occupied Washington, a massive storm struck the city. Some accounts describe hurricane-force winds. Buildings collapsed. Fires spread unpredictably. British troops suffered casualties from the storm itself. Tornado-like winds reportedly lifted cannons into the air. Chaos consumed both sides. Later, many Americans described the storm almost like divine intervention. A miracle, a sign God had saved the nation. Historians debate exactly how severe the storm truly was. But psychologically, the timing mattered enormously. At the exact moment America seemed helpless, nature itself appeared to strike the invaders. The story became part of national mythology. Yet despite this symbolism, the military situation remained dangerous. Britain still held significant advantages, and the war was far from over. As peace negotiations quietly continued in Europe, another major battle approached. New Orleans. British forces hoped to capture the vital port city and strengthen their bargaining position. Defending the city was Andrew Jackson. Jackson assembled a strange coalition. Frontier fighters, militia troops, free black soldiers, pirates, volunteers, local defenders. The coming battle felt desperate. Then, in January 1815, the impossible happened. British forces launched direct assaults against heavily defended American positions and suffered catastrophic losses. The Battle of New Orleans became a stunning American victory. British casualties were devastating. American losses were comparatively tiny. Andrew Jackson became a national hero almost overnight. There was just one strange detail. The war had technically already ended. Weeks earlier, diplomats had signed the Treaty of Ghent in Europe. But news traveled slowly across the Atlantic. The soldiers fighting in Louisiana did not yet know peace had been declared. Men died after the war was officially over. Still, the symbolism mattered enormously. After years of humiliation, America suddenly had a heroic ending. And that ending transformed public memory forever. Instead of remembering failed invasions and burned cities, Americans focused on New Orleans. National pride recovered. The war became remembered as survival, even victory, but reality remained far more complicated. The answer depends on who tells the story. For the United States, surviving against Britain boosted national confidence enormously. Americans celebrated the idea that they had stood against the British Empire again and survived. Andrew Jackson became a massive political figure. National identity strengthened. For Britain, the war was secondary compared to defeating Napoleon. British leaders achieved their main strategic goal, preventing major American threats during the Napoleonic Wars. For Canada, the war became foundational. The colonies had resisted invasion successfully. That memory helped shape future Canadian identity. For Native nations, however, the outcome was devastating. Tecumseh was dead. The Indigenous Confederation collapsed. British support faded. American expansion accelerated westward. Native peoples suffered the greatest long-term losses of all. And this is why the War of 1812 feels so complicated historically. Every side tells the story differently. Every nation remembers different heroes. Every narrative hides different tragedies. Today, most people barely know the War of 1812 happened. Why? Because it does not fit neatly into simple historical storytelling. The war was messy, confusing, embarrassing at times, heroic at others. There was no absolute victory, no dramatic surrender ceremony, no giant territorial change. Yet despite being forgotten internationally, the war shaped North America permanently. It strengthened American nationalism. It helped create Canadian identity. It devastated Indigenous resistance movements. And it transformed the future relationship between America and Canada forever. Without the war, modern North America might look completely different. Today, the U.S.-Canada border is considered the longest peaceful border in the world. But peace was not inevitable. After the war, distrust remained strong. Militarization continued. Future conflicts still seemed possible. In another timeline, North America might have evolved into a continent divided by endless warfare, repeated invasions, permanent hostility, massive border fortifications, national hatred lasting centuries. Instead, something unusual happened. Slowly, relations improved. Trade expanded. Diplomacy strengthened. Former enemies became partners. Over generations, the memory of war faded. But the possibility of a darker future never fully disappeared from history. The peaceful relationship modern people take for granted today emerged from the ashes of one of North America's most dangerous conflicts. The War of 1812 is often called the Forgotten War. But perhaps it should be remembered more carefully than ever. Because beneath the patriotic myths lies a terrifying reality. There was a moment when the United States looked weak enough to collapse. There was a moment when invasion seemed possible. There was a moment when political division nearly tore the country apart from within. There was a moment when native nations fought desperately to stop their own destruction. And there was a moment when the future map of North America hung in uncertainty. History today makes the outcome feel inevitable, but it was not inevitable at all. If only a few battles had gone differently, if Britain had committed more resources earlier, if America's political divisions had worsened, if Tecumseh's Confederation had survived longer, the modern world might look completely different. The border between America and Canada might be heavily militarized. Canada itself might not exist in its current form. The United States might have fractured permanently. And North America could have become a continent defined not by partnership, but by endless war. That is why this conflict matters. Not because it created clear heroes, not because it produced simple victories, but because it revealed how fragile nations truly are. The War of 1812 was not just a forgotten conflict. It was a warning about arrogance, a warning about division, a warning about underestimating enemies, and a warning that history's most dangerous moments are often the ones people eventually choose to forget.